People-pleasing is rooted in fear, not kindness. On the surface, it appears noble, putting others first, avoiding conflict, keeping the peace. But beneath that polished surface often lies a deep fear of rejection, disapproval, and abandonment. Many people don't realize that their compulsive need to please others is actually a survival mechanism developed early in life. Maybe it started in childhood, when love and validation were given conditionally. Maybe you learned that being agreeable kept you safe from criticism or punishment. So now, without even knowing it, you've built your adult identity around being the nice one. You smile even when you're angry. You say yes even when you're drowning. You apologize when it's not your fault. And deep down, it's not because you're so selfless. It's because you're afraid. Afraid of being disliked. Afraid of being seen as difficult. Afraid of being alone. This fear quietly controls your decisions. You're polite to people who cross your boundaries. You tolerate situations that make you uncomfortable. You let others speak over you, take from you, and define you. Not because you're okay with it, but because the alternative, asserting yourself, speaking up, risking confrontation, feels terrifying. So instead of expressing your real thoughts, you suppress them. You nod along, you go along, and you tell yourself it's better this way. But it's not. Because while you think you're preserving relationships, you're actually eroding yourself. Every time you betray your own needs to serve someone else's comfort, a piece of your authenticity disappears. And the people around you don't even notice, because you've made it your job to keep them happy. There's a powerful difference between being kind and being a people pleaser. Kindness comes from strength. It's a deliberate choice to offer value, compassion, or grace. People pleasing, on the other hand, comes from fear. It's a strategy to avoid rejection. It's manipulative, even if unconsciously so, because it's not about what the other person needs, it's about what you want to avoid. You're not giving because you have an abundance to share. You're giving because you're scared of what will happen if you don't. That's not generosity. That's emotional bargaining, and over time it creates resentment, burnout, and confusion about who you really are. People pleasers often struggle with identity. They shapeshift to fit into every environment. With one person they're agreeable and soft-spoken. With another they laugh at jokes they don't find funny. With a third they offer help they don't actually want to give. And at the end of the day they're left wondering why they feel so drained, so invisible, so disconnected. It's because you've traded your authenticity for approval. You've confused acceptance with peace. But there is no peace in abandoning yourself. That unease you feel, the exhaustion, the quiet frustration, the simmering resentment, that's your soul telling you something's wrong. It's telling you that fear is leading your life, not truth. And the tragedy is people-pleasing rarely gets you what you want. You think being nice will make others appreciate you, but often they just take you for granted. You think being agreeable will keep you safe from conflict, but it usually just makes people assume you don't have opinions or limits. You think avoiding confrontation will preserve harmony, but in reality it breeds passive aggression, confusion, and inner turmoil. People don't respect doormats, they walk on them, and the more you allow it, the more invisible you become. You start to disappear from your own life, fading into the background of other people's needs, demands, and expectations. Many people pleasers pride themselves on being low maintenance. They say things like, "I'm easy," or "I don't mind," or "whatever works for you." But what they're really saying is, "I've learned to silence my needs so others won't abandon me." That's not humility, it's fear dressed up as virtue, and it becomes a prison. Because once you set the precedent that your needs are negotiable, others stop asking. They assume you'll always bend, always adjust, always accommodate. And when you finally do speak up, you're met with confusion or resistance. Not because you're wrong, but because you've trained everyone to believe you don't have boundaries. You've built a life where your silence equals consent. Breaking this cycle starts with recognizing the root. It's not about changing your behavior, it's about healing the fear that drives it. Why do you feel unsafe saying no? Why do you feel guilty when you choose yourself? Why do you believe that love must be earned through sacrifice? These are the questions that begin the path to freedom. Because once you see that your niceness is a shield, a mask, a way to hide your fear of rejection, you can begin to replace it with something stronger, self-respect. Saying yes to everything means saying no to yourself. On the surface, saying yes seems generous, cooperative, even admirable. It makes you feel useful, appreciated, important. But underneath that surface is a subtle but dangerous habit of self-abandonment. Every yes that is not aligned with your true capacity or desire is a silent no to your own priorities, your own boundaries, your own growth. You might not see it immediately, but over time the consequences of compulsive yes-saying begin to add up. You feel overcommitted, stretched too thin, resentful, and confused about why you never seem to have time for yourself. It's because you're spending your life responding to other people's demands instead of designing your own direction. There's a cost to being the person everyone relies on. You get labeled dependable, trustworthy, loyal, but at what expense? If you're always available for others, you're never truly available for yourself. Your dreams get postponed, your self-care becomes optional, your voice becomes quiet. And what's even worse, you start to lose track of who you are. When every decision is made to serve someone else's convenience or comfort, your own needs start to feel like an inconvenience. You start to believe that making time for yourself is selfish, that resting is lazy, that prioritizing your own goals is somehow wrong. So you bury your ambitions under the weight of being agreeable. You silence your desires for the sake of being liked. You betray your truth in exchange for temporary approval. It's easy to fall into this trap, especially if you've been conditioned to equate your worth with your usefulness. If you were taught that love is something you earn by being helpful, accommodating, or easygoing, then saying yes becomes a survival tactic. It becomes your way of proving that you belong, that you matter. But this mindset creates an invisible contract. You keep giving and giving, silently hoping that someone will notice, appreciate you, and one day return the favor. That day rarely comes, because people don't reward endless giving, they come to expect it. And the more you offer, the more is asked of you. You become the go-to person, the one who never says no. But underneath that praise is a slow erosion of your own identity and peace of mind. What makes this even more complicated is that the world often applauds self-sacrifice. You get compliments for how much you do for others. People thank you, admire you, even envy your ability to keep up with everything. But they don't see what it costs you. They don't see the late nights, the suppressed emotions, the constant anxiety. They don't see how exhausted you are, how lost you feel, how badly you want to just say no but don't know how. They see your performance, not your pain, and that creates a dangerous loop, because the more you're validated for your self-neglect, the more you're tempted to keep doing it, even as it drains you. The truth is, you teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. When you always say yes, even at your own expense, you send a message. Your time is flexible, your energy is endless, your needs are secondary, and that message becomes your reputation. Over time, people stop asking if you're okay with things. They just assume you are. They stop considering your limits, your desires, your voice. Not because they're malicious, but because you've never shown them where the line is. You've never taught them that your yes means something because you've never let them hear your no. Reclaiming your life means reclaiming your boundaries. And that starts with the courage to disappoint others in order to stay true to yourself. It means realizing that not every opportunity is worth taking, not every request deserves your time, and not every relationship is worth maintaining if it costs you your well-being. It means getting comfortable with the discomfort of saying no, not out of rebellion but out of respect for your own life. Because every time you say yes to something you don't truly want, you're saying no to something you do. You're saying no to rest, no to growth, no to authenticity, no to your own evolution. It's not about being difficult, it's about being deliberate. Saying no doesn't make you rude, unkind, or unreliable. It makes you clear. It makes you honest. It makes you someone who values their energy enough to use it wisely. And when you live from that place, when your yes carries intention and your no carries conviction, you stop living reactively and start living with purpose. You begin to reclaim the hours, days, and years that were lost to pleasing others. You begin to see yourself not just as someone who supports others, but as someone worthy of their own support. You realize that protecting your time, your peace, and your truth is not selfish, it's necessary. Boundaries aren't selfish, they're essential. In a world that often equates being a good person with being endlessly available, boundaries are frequently misunderstood. People may call you cold, distant, or difficult when you begin to set limits, especially if they're used to you always saying yes. But the truth is, boundaries are not a rejection of others, they are a recognition of self. They are a clear statement of what you value, what you tolerate, and what you will no longer accept. Without them, your identity begins to dissolve. You become a reflection of everyone else's wants, while your own voice grows quieter and weaker with each compromise you make. Many people struggle with boundaries because they've been taught that love means self-sacrifice, that caring for someone requires putting their needs above your own, that being liked is more important than being whole. But when you live like this, you slowly begin to disconnect from your own emotional compass. You ignore the discomfort in your chest when someone oversteps. You silence your inner resistance when someone takes advantage. And you justify disrespect by telling yourself that you're being kind, patient, or understanding. But you're not being kind. You're being controlled by guilt and fear. Guilt tells you that saying no is wrong. Fear tells you that asserting yourself will lead to rejection. So you remain silent. You allow the intrusion. You swallow your discomfort. Boundaries are a form of self-respect. They're not walls to keep people out, but doors that show people how to enter your life respectfully. They tell others how you expect to be treated, how you protect your energy, and what behavior you will or will not engage with. Without boundaries, people will push and pull at your time, your emotions, your focus, often not because they mean harm, but because you've never communicated where your limits are. You assume others will just know what hurts you, what overwhelms you, or what drains you. But they don't. People treat you based on the standards you set, not the intentions you have. If you constantly say yes even when you're exhausted, people will assume you're fine. If you never express frustration, people will assume you're okay with being overlooked. Your silence doesn't protect peace, it gives permission. Learning to set boundaries requires unlearning deep patterns. It means facing the discomfort of confrontation. It means accepting that not everyone will like you when you start choosing yourself. Some relationships will be tested. Some people will resist the new version of you who no longer bends so easily. But the people who truly value you, those who respect your worth, won't see your boundaries as a threat. They'll see them as a sign of growth. They'll honor the space you need and appreciate the clarity you bring. Because real connection doesn't require sacrifice of self. It thrives on honesty, mutual respect, and healthy limits. Without boundaries, burnout is inevitable. You give too much. You care too hard. You absorb emotions that aren't yours to carry.
You say yes to obligations that leave you depleted. And then you wonder why you feel resentful, anxious, or numb. It's because your inner world is screaming for protection. Your mind is begging for rest. Your heart is craving authenticity. But you can't have any of that if your energy is constantly being hijacked by people and situations that don't serve your higher purpose. Every time you say yes to something misaligned, you say no to something meaningful. There is a quiet power that comes from drawing the line. It's not loud, it's not aggressive, it's calm, grounded, and unwavering. It says, I know who I am, I know what I need, I know what I will no longer tolerate. And when you embody that energy, the world begins to respond differently. People sense your clarity, they feel your strength. They realize they can no longer manipulate your guilt or exploit your kindness. You stop being an easy target for emotional takers and become a clear force of presence. Not because you became colder, but because you became wiser. Boundaries also allow you to give more freely. When you are not constantly on edge, when your life is not filled with obligation and resentment, your capacity to love, to serve, and to show up for others increases. You give from fullness, not from fear. You help because you want to, not because you're afraid not to. That's the difference between generosity and martyrdom. One is empowering, the other is exhausting. Boundaries make that distinction possible. They are not the enemy of love. They are the foundation of healthy, lasting love, both for others and for yourself. Being too nice often invites disrespect. It's one of the hardest truths to accept, especially for people who have built their identity around being agreeable, helpful, and accommodating. But the reality is that when you're always bending to make others comfortable, you teach them to expect that behavior. The more you tolerate, the more people assume you will always be there, always available, always saying yes, even when it hurts you. Over time, this leads to a slow erosion of respect. Not because you're unworthy of it, but because people tend to value what has limits, what has boundaries, what requires effort. And when you make everything easy for everyone around you, they start to take you for granted. There's a difference between being kind and being compliant. Kindness comes from strength. It's a deliberate choice to be compassionate, without compromising your own values. Compliance, however, is rooted in fear. It's the automatic yes when you want to say no, the fake smile when you're seething inside, the silence when your boundaries are being trampled. People can feel the difference. They may not say it, but they sense when someone is afraid to stand up for themselves. And in the harsh reality of human behavior, fear is often met with dominance. When you show people that you'll tolerate anything just to keep the peace, some of them will exploit that. Not all, but some, and those are the ones who cause the most damage. It doesn't start with obvious mistreatment. It starts small. Someone interrupts you repeatedly, and you laugh it off. Someone makes a joke at your expense, and you smile awkwardly instead of calling it out. Someone keeps asking for favors without ever offering support in return, and you keep saying yes because you don't want to seem rude. Over time, this becomes a pattern. People begin to assume that you're okay with being the one who always adjusts, always gives, always steps aside. And the moment you push back, they act surprised, or worse, offended. Because your previous behavior trained them to believe that you have no limits. The irony is that most people want to be respected more than they want to be liked. They want to feel seen, valued, and understood. But in the pursuit of being liked, they abandon the very things that earn respect. They say yes too often. They apologize when they haven't done anything wrong. They avoid difficult conversations and swallow their opinions. This might make you pleasant to be around, but it doesn't make you powerful. And people respect power, not dominance, not cruelty, but the quiet confidence of someone who knows their worth and doesn't compromise it for temporary approval. Disrespect doesn't always look like shouting or insults. Sometimes it looks like indifference. Like people showing up late because they know you'll wait. Like coworkers dumping tasks on you because you never complain. Like friends or partners expecting you to carry the emotional weight of the relationship because you always do. These are subtle forms of disrespect, and they're just as damaging as open hostility. They signal that your time, energy, and needs are less important. And when this becomes the norm, you begin to internalize it. You start believing that maybe your needs really don't matter. Maybe this is just the way life is. But life doesn't have to be that way. Respect is something you cultivate by how you treat yourself and how you allow others to treat you. If you constantly minimize your own needs, others will too. If you act like your feelings are secondary, others will treat them as an afterthought. If you allow behavior that makes you uncomfortable, people will assume it's acceptable. It's not enough to expect respect. You have to demand it through your actions, your words, and your presence. And that often means being willing to disappoint people. Being willing to say no. Being willing to walk away from relationships or situations that thrive on your silence. This is where many people get stuck. They think setting boundaries or standing up for themselves makes them mean, aggressive, or selfish. But the truth is you can be firm without being cruel. You can be clear without being cold. You can demand respect without raising your voice. And often the shift begins with small things. Speaking up when someone interrupts. Saying no without over-explaining. Asking for what you need without apologizing. These small acts of self-respect send a powerful message. I matter. My time matters. My energy matters. People will test you, especially if they're used to you being the nice one. They'll question your change. Some will push harder to see if you'll fold. That's normal. But the more consistently you show up with clarity and strength, the more they'll adjust. Some may leave. Let them. Anyone who only stayed because you were easy to manipulate doesn't deserve a place in your life. The people who are meant for you will respect your growth. They'll honor your boundaries. And they'll begin to treat you not as a convenience, but as an equal. Nice people often confuse peacekeeping with peace-building. They think that staying quiet in the face of disrespect is virtuous, that tolerating mistreatment is a sign of strength, and that never expressing their true feelings makes them more lovable or safe. But there's a stark difference between avoiding conflict and creating true peace. Peacekeeping is about surface-level harmony. It's about keeping everyone else comfortable, even if you're breaking inside. Peace-building, on the other hand, is rooted in truth. It requires honesty, boundaries, and sometimes uncomfortable conversations. Being too nice often means you're keeping things smooth on the outside, while chaos grows on the inside. When your priority becomes avoiding discomfort, you begin to sacrifice authenticity. You don't speak up when someone crosses a line. You laugh at jokes that offend you. You go along with plans that drain you. You agree just to avoid the awkward tension of disagreement. And over time, these small denials of self turn into resentment. You start to feel used, unseen, and unappreciated. But because you've trained yourself not to speak up, you internalize that frustration. You turn it inward. You blame yourself for being weak, for being too emotional, for always saying yes. The very kindness that was meant to connect you to others ends up disconnecting you from yourself. The problem with always being the peacekeeper is that you become a stranger to your own truth. You don't know where your boundaries begin and end because you've spent so long bending them to suit others. You don't know how to assert your needs because you've spent years pretending you didn't have any. You don't know how to tolerate someone else's disappointment or anger because you've worked so hard to avoid it. In trying to keep everyone else happy, you've abandoned the one person you were truly responsible for, yourself. People who are too nice often carry a deep fear, the fear of being rejected if they show their true self. They believe that their value lies in how much they can give, how agreeable they can be, how easy they are to be around. They suppress their own needs in exchange for approval. But this kind of approval is fragile. It's based on a version of you that isn't even real. And the moment you start expressing who you truly are, your anger, your preferences, your boundaries, people who are only attached to the compliant version of you may pull away. This feels like a loss, but it's actually a gift, because the relationships that can't handle your authenticity were never built on anything real to begin with. Real peace can't exist without honesty. When you tell the truth about what you need, what you feel, and what you won't tolerate, you create the conditions for genuine connection. Not everyone will like it. Some people will resist, but others will respect you more. They'll see you not as a doormat, but as a person with integrity. And even if the truth causes tension in the short term, it builds deeper trust in the long term. People know where you stand. They know your yes means yes, and your no means no. They know your kindness is genuine, not performative. True peace building is courageous. It requires you to stay grounded when others are uncomfortable. It asks you to face the possibility of rejection without shrinking. It challenges you to put honesty above harmony and clarity above comfort. It teaches you that being real is more important than being liked. And in doing so, it gives you back your power. You stop walking on eggshells. You stop over-explaining. You stop apologizing for simply existing. You learn to hold your space, speak your truth, and protect your peace, not through avoidance, but through strength.
Nice people also often assume that conflict is inherently bad. But conflict, when handled with maturity and clarity, is not a threat. It's a doorway. It's a chance to deepen understanding, to establish boundaries, to clear the air. Avoiding conflict might keep things quiet, but it doesn't create peace. It just buries problems under the surface, where they grow into resentment and confusion. Eventually, something breaks. Either the relationship or the person who's been holding everything in. Peace isn't passive. It's intentional. It's active. It's something you create, not something you protect by staying silent. You don't have to be loud or aggressive to build peace. You just have to be honest. You have to stop filtering every word through the lens of what other people might think. You have to stop betraying yourself in order to maintain appearances. And you have to believe that your truth matters, that your feelings, your needs, your voice are just as valid as anyone else's. Because they are. Your peace matters. Not the fake kind that comes from avoiding hard conversations, but the real kind that comes from knowing you are living in alignment with who you are. When you're too nice, you lose your sense of self. You begin to morph into whatever others need you to be, saying what they want to hear, doing what they expect, and adjusting your behavior to maintain peace. Slowly but surely your identity gets diluted. The boundaries that once made you who you are become blurry, and you start to question your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own desires. You find yourself unsure of what you want, constantly looking to others for direction, reassurance, and validation. This isn't kindness. It's self-abandonment disguised as generosity. People-pleasing may look like love, but it often stems from fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood, fear of conflict, fear of not being enough. And when fear guides your behavior, you end up shrinking yourself just to fit into other people's expectations. You silence your opinions to avoid arguments. You minimize your accomplishments to avoid making others uncomfortable. You ignore your discomfort because addressing it might disrupt the delicate balance you've been desperately trying to maintain. But in trying to make everyone else happy, you end up miserable. You can't keep giving to others while starving yourself of truth. The irony is that in trying to be everything for everyone, you become invisible. People don't see the real you. They see a version of you that is convenient, agreeable, and easy to manipulate. They may like you, but they don't respect you. They may depend on you, but they don't invest in you. And the most painful part is they don't even know they're hurting you because you never tell them. You nod, you smile, you say it's fine. And then you wonder why you feel so alone, so disconnected, so hollow. There comes a point when you have to ask yourself, who am I doing this for? Am I being nice because it's aligned with my values, or because I'm afraid of the consequences if I'm not? Am I helping because I genuinely want to, or because I'm terrified of being judged if I say no? Am I really this calm and agreeable, or have I just never been given permission to express my frustration, my pain, my truth? You can only live in the shadows of yourself for so long before it starts to eat away at your confidence, your clarity, your joy. Reclaiming yourself doesn't mean becoming rude or selfish. It means telling the truth. It means letting people see who you are beyond the mask of politeness. It means honoring your feelings instead of dismissing them. It means learning to say no without guilt, to speak up without apology, and to stand your ground even when it's uncomfortable. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about returning to the person you were before fear taught you to hide. You may lose people when you stop being too nice. That's the truth. Some relationships only survive because you're the one doing all the bending. The moment you stop contorting yourself to fit into their narrative, they may pull away. Let them. Because the cost of keeping people who don't see the real you is too high. You don't need more people who like the version of you that doesn't exist. You need people who see you fully and love you fiercely. Not because you make their lives easier, but because your authenticity brings light to their own. Finding your true self again means sitting with discomfort. It means disappointing people, dealing with their reactions, and holding your ground when it would be easier to give in. But this discomfort is not punishment. It's the path to freedom. Every time you choose yourself, you take a step away from codependency and a step toward confidence. Every time you speak your truth, you shatter the illusion that love must be earned by self-sacrifice. You start to realize that real connection doesn't come from being agreeable. It comes from being real. The world doesn't need more people who are simply nice. It needs people who are grounded, honest, and alive. People who say what they mean and mean what they say. People who give without resentment, love without conditions, and live without constantly apologizing for their existence. That's not just being kind, that's being powerful. And the world respects people who live from that place. When you reclaim your sense of self, you don't just feel better, you show up stronger, lead better, love deeper, and inspire others to do the same. Because your authenticity gives others permission to stop performing and start living.